Like cooking, everything has a recipe.
A set of instructions to follow in order to gain a certain result.
Music is no different.
Be it ingredients for a dish, a set list for an amazing show,
Or a release strategy for a successful launch.
these are all recipes.
Hi, we're your hosts, Sean.
And I'm Brandon.
Come and join us in our kitchen as we go through the Music Makers Cookbook.
Let's get cooking.
Welcome to the Music Makers Cookbook, the podcast where we help independent artists like yourself craft recipes for success in the music industry. The intro said it, but I'm going to say it again. I'm Sean.
I'm Brandon.
And today we're going to be talking about crafting a menu for your life. That's the episode of this podcast.
It's a great title.
Said it already. I've decided that just this second.
Yeah,
I had a couple on the page,
title.
but I picked that one. So
I like that one. Yeah, there's nothing like spur of the moment deciding on something.
Exactly.
It just pushes you into it. Before we start, I have to ask you one thing. I know we have a appetizer planned out. It's going to be the day I almost died.
Yes.
Maybe the whole month I almost died, but
Yes.
that's okay. How do you like the coffee?
Oh yeah, Brandon has this cherry coffee.
Yeah, it's Michigan cherry coffee.
You know, the more I drink it, the more it grows on me.
You know, what was that initial sip like?
The initial sip was this is coffee with cherry cough syrup in it.
Yeah.
But now it's like, no, this is actually like better than
It's
cough
like
syrup.
It's like good for variety. So like if you've had just regular coffee and you're like, I just need to spice it up a little bit in my life, it's a good go-to. I don't think I could drink it every day. And I haven't drank one in probably a few months, but like it's a good palate cleanser, I guess. It's a good reset.
I feel like if I had a whole dairy cream or something in
Yeah.
it would help bring
Like
it
from Guernsey or something.
Yeah, it would flesh out the cherry more. Or have you ever put chocolate milk in your coffee?
No.
As the creamer?
Would strawberry milk be valid for Michigan cherry coffee?
That's a lot of fruit, but possible. I'd have to try it. I'm down to try it.
We're gonna do it live on an episode. Swear to God.
Excitingness. Join us live on Sunday. Yeah. We try different coffees.
Oh man, now we're baristas. So we just ruined our own branding.
No, we didn't.
Fuck.
That's okay. And we're not talking about branding today. We're talking about goals. But before we go into goals, we're going to talk about the goal that you had of not dying.
Yeah. So, okay. The
Tell
whole
us a
reason
bit
why this
about
got
that.
brought up was because I actually just had somebody, one of my really good friends, cancel on me tomorrow for a session because he has COVID. I hope he feels better ASAP and he's able to just overcome this quickly because that's just no joke. 2020, all the way back. I'm in junior in college, even though I should have been like a super duper duper senior. And it's like the day before my birthday, and I start to feel like shit. Like I'm walking to class, and I'm like, this is terrible. And like at U of M, you have to walk like 1.5 miles to class, and like I was just like in the car dying before my music business class. I get in my music business class, and I'm sitting there. I'm like the entire time. I'm like, I think I had the flu or something. Worst part is I see one of my friends out there because he's working for this company that's doing landscaping surveying for U of M at the time. And I see him and he stops by because like he was right at the music school. I was like, oh, let's talk for a second. And I talked to him that day and I was like, oh shit. And like, that'll come up later actually. And, I go back to my car and I'm like, dude, I have one more class. I'm gonna stick it out and then I'm gonna go home. I go home, dude, and I'm running like a massive fever and I just generally feel like shit. This does not go away. And I take Tamiflu from my doctor for like a week, right? And I have like 4 or 5 doctor's notes written out from her, excusing me from class. And like my teachers, they were like, dude, I hope you feel better. And I'm sitting there in my bed dying, right? And I'm watching this COVID thing on the news and I'm like, no, it's not here yet, right? And this is February. So this is right before
There's lockdown.
March. Yeah. This is 2 weeks before the lockdown. So I might have been one of the first people to have COVID in the state.
Patient zero.
Funny enough, the person that actually was officially the first person to have COVID in the state, I went to high school with her. Her dad was the one that got it. Weird, right? So obviously we're just a big germy cesspool over in this area. But dude, I was dying. I was like 103 degree temperatures. Motrin wouldn't break my temperature. It was only Tylenol that would work. And like, I was dying. And eventually, dude, my cough got really bad. And I had a cough. I developed a cough. And it was so bad that my lungs, when I would inhale, my lungs would actually crackle because I couldn't clear it. And like, it was really hard to breathe. And it was probably one of the scariest things I've ever had in my life. And my doctor brought me in after the fourth time. She was like, okay, it's time to come in, and she diagnosed me with pneumonia at the time, but I really think that it was COVID. And I went back to school after spring break. So I was out for a straight month. And I was still coughing when I went back to school. I was trying to hide it because that's when shit was hitting the fan. I remember on that Wednesday when we locked down, I was in class, and I was like, I hope no one thinks I have it. And then 2 hours later, school shut down. I almost died though. I legitimately almost died. I had to go on an antibiotic and everything. It was terrible. And I think it cleared up finally after maybe another month of that. So
damn.
Yeah, I really almost died from COVID.
I never knew that story.
Yeah, dude. It was scary. It was not good. So happy birthday to me that year.
Yeah.
That was awesome. Good experience. So
I've learned something very important from this.
What's that?
Your birthday is in February.
Dude, February birthdays are elite. When's your birthday?
September. Which, by the way, September birthdays are elite.
But I had one goal in mind that entire time. And it was practically a 3-month goal at that time. And that was to not die. And here we are. I was able to measure that later by me living.
You're jumping ahead of
terrible transition.
You tried.
I did try.
But I mean, yeah, it's it's so bad. But no, yeah, today we're talking about goals, how to set them, how to plan for them, how to keep them on track. We're going to be talking about SMART goals, what they are, how to measure your progress through it, and just make sure that you know what you want to do so that when things start happening for you, you're not caught off guard or doing something that doesn't actually align with what you want, that you could potentially look back and regret on. Yeah. But I mean, we kind of joked this is a bad transition, but not dying is a good goal.
It's a great goal.
You're like, hey, I don't want to die, so I'm going to go to the doctor because visiting the doctor aligns with my goal of no death.
Yes.
Taking medicine aligns with no death.
Absolutely.
Sleeping aligns with no death.
Yes. It's actually a perfect goal. It's a perfect goal. So, that could be a lifetime goal. So remember that.
Well, so before we kind of jump in to some of the things that we see, normal format of, what are the things that we see most people doing, what are the downsides of not setting goals, and then helping you with the progress later on it. Just so you kind of have it at the beginning, you can write it down, keep it in mind as we talk about the rest of the episode. I'm going to go over something called SMART goals. SMART goals is an acronym. It's been around for a couple of decades. It's just it's a very common way of planning for what you want to do in the future, especially in the business world. But, going to showcase it to you that it can and should be used for your goals with your music career, because as we talked about in another episode, it's a business. Mm-hmm. So a SMART goal, as I said, is an acronym that stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. If your goals fall under all these specific words in this acronym, sorry, I had to swallow the coffee, then, it's actually something you can follow and something that can help push you towards where you want to be. So let's kind of break that down a little bit more. The first one is specific. So when you make a goal, you want to make sure, okay, is this as detailed as possible? Am I being specific with it? The goal of being a rock star isn't a specific goal.
It's not specific.
No, right. A more specific one would be like making a living from touring by 5 years from now, or just making a living from touring. That's more specific. Or making 20% of my income based on royalties from my music. That's more of a specific goal. And the next one stands for measurable. So basically, like, how do you know when you get there? What can you do to keep track of, am I here or not? And like, make a living from touring. Well, are you touring? Yes or no. That's, you can know if you're doing it, and can you pay all your bills from that? You can look at, okay, I make this much income from touring. These are my bills. This covers my bills. Okay, I've measured it. Yeah. Or as I said earlier, like to have 20% of your income be from royalties. Okay, well, this is how much I make. This is how much I make from royalties. Is this 20%? Yes or no? If it's no, how do I shop it out to maybe like licensing or whatnot to get more royalties in so it's more passive? Or if it's over, yeah, you did it. You're doing a good job. The next one is achievable. So like, make sure what you're doing is doable. Like, you can overestimate to motivate yourself, shoot for the moon. So if you miss, you hit the stars or whatever, that whole thing. But don't overdo it so you're kind of demotivated. For example, like if it's like, I want to make a living doing music. Well, what does that mean? Well, I need to make, all my expenses are about $50,000. So a realistic goal is, by the end of the year, I need to make $50,000 in music. You might want to say, well, by the end of the year, I want to make $75,000. So you have to start thinking creatively, like, okay, well, how do I get even more than what I need to live? And even if you miss it, you get like 65,000. That's 10 less than what your goal is, but 15 more than what you needed originally. Right. Now, if you say like, well, no, I need to make $1 million for my music in the first year, that's not doable. That's not actionable. That's not achievable. You're not going to do that. So it can be demoralizing to not hit. So motivate yourself a little bit, but make sure what you're doing is actually achievable.
Absolutely.
The next one is relevant. So like, do your goals relate? Do they tie together? So if your goal is to have a home 5 years from now, be married, have kids, and everything you're doing is setting up a big tour so you can like all your money comes from touring and you're just building all these connections to go around and around the, nationally, internationally, all that. Well, 5 years from now, your wife's going to be like, well, no, you're supposed to have a home, but everything you're doing, everything that you used to make money is from touring. Well, it doesn't align. Yeah, right. Now, if you're like, okay, well, I want to have a home in 5 years, so I need to start setting up myself for success at home. So I must do live streaming tours, bring the people to me. As I said earlier, like sync licensing your music, maybe get more into songwriting so you can sell it out to other artists that they can tour and you can get the royalties from that, things like that. So just make sure what you're doing aligns with the end goal. So it's best to plan far in the future. We're going to talk about that at the end, but make sure it's relevant and all ties together. And the last one is time bound. Set deadlines. When will you have this done? Like for this podcast, when we set the goals for this, the time bound of like, okay, we're going to have these episodes done by this date. We're going to record this many, have this many in the bank for backup. This is the release date. We have to have the episode art done by this point, this done by that point, that done by that point. So by the time we're recording this, we have our first episodes are being released tomorrow. Yep. And we're on track to hit the deadline. We're kind of pushing it close because I still have to finish up the editing on the final of the 3 episodes. But podcast art's done, intro's done. We've dialed in the recording space, part of the episode. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see the progress.
Yeah, absolutely.
The first episode we're releasing is the 5th one we recorded. So then the second one's the first, the third one's the second. So you'll kind of see that progress where we started,
Star
where
Wars.
We are. Yeah, we went backwards. Yeah. But that whole thing of, okay, what do we have to get done by this point? And you can make learning part of that process. Right. And, like, hey, I have to have an album done by the end of the year. Well, you can turn some of your songs and release them as singles. You don't have to wait for the whole album to be done. Kind of like how we don't have to make sure the camera's all good and all the audio's good before we make an episode. It can be part of it. We're learning too, we're growing too, and that's, joining us, you're seeing that, and hopefully that inspires you to learn and grow as well. So those are the 5 things with SMART goals. I always have a hard time remembering it, so I'm going to go over it again. It's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. So keep those in mind as we go through the rest of the episode. And we're going to talk about some of the things that we see of people not doing and some of the things that happen when you don't do it. But by the end of this, you'll be able to have a plan that aligns with your goals for the future that, helps motivate you and keep you confident that you're on the right path to actually fulfilling the lifestyle that you want to have. So that's the really goal of this episode.
Well said. Yep, absolutely. So we'll dive into the first specific mistake that we see a lot of people making, and that is not having a goal in the first place. So you have no structure. You don't even have goals written down in your note app or anything like that. It's just all by a whim. Whims can be cool at certain points, but I would argue that goals will allow you to actually explore whims later in your career, if that makes sense, right? So like, it's kind of like investing. So you taking a goal and making it, become a reality in some way, or just having it set aside, and you're putting aside time, you're putting aside money for that goal. It's like you're investing in the opportunity to be able to go out on a whim at really cool points that you would not otherwise be able to plan for. So like, let's say you get into like a studio and there's an artist there that you really wanted to work with, and like now you can do that because you've set aside time in other places to allow yourself to be at that point, or whatever the case may be. But definitely just being able to go out on a whim and do this is not always the best way to do it. And I would argue it's probably a bad way to do it most of the time, but not having a goal in the first place is the biggest detriment that you could have. And I mean, not only because that's the kind of episode we're recording, but seriously, like if you have no place you want to go, then you're just going to be driving.
Yeah, exactly. It can lead to a sense of, I'm not progressing anywhere. And you said you're just gonna be driving. Joy rides are a thing. It can be fun to have the top down, beautiful day, sun's going through the air. There's times and places for that. And you can build those kinds of things into your goals. Like, okay, I need to be able to have these experiences to motivate myself. That's the thing. Put the top down on a cool day, breeze goes through your hair. That can be fun. You can feed that into your goal. You can put aside time to have fun, to inspire you for different things that align with your goals or creations that align with your goals. But if that's all you're doing, it can lead to a sense of losslessness. Like, man, I've been driving for 5 years and I'm still playing in my local scene. I have no growth outside of this city. I've been doing this for 10 years and I still have less than 50 listeners on my Spotify. Like, I feel like there's no growth. I'm not progressing. And also, if you don't have your goals, you don't know what to look for actual success, because maybe I've got less than 1,000 listeners on Spotify and I've been doing this for 10 years. I feel I'm not doing it enough, but you've got an amazing local scene who really supports you. That all your shows maybe you have like 100, 150 people that come up that buy your merch or, support you or to crowdfund your album, or like people really care where you are. You become like a local hero, local legend. But you're not thinking about that because you're focusing, like, you think the goal should be, man, I need to have 100,000 Spotify plays, like these vanity metrics. So even if you are improving, it may feel like you're not if you don't know what your goals actually are. Because if your goals are just to touch people and improve their lives, like through your stories, through your music, then having 100, 150 people locally who support you fully could be like the end of the rainbow for that kind of goal.
Right.
So, it's good to have time to be fun, but having a goal helps you know that there is growth because you can, follow that.
You said something really important that I want to touch on before we go to the next point real quick. You were talking about like the point of reflection, right? So like you were saying, when you don't have a goal and you're kind of just joyriding around, you have nothing to look back on and reflect on, and that necessarily like gives you the impression of success or some sort of achievable action within that goal, right? And I would argue that a lot of the time people end up reflecting. So this we will touch on reflection again, but I wanted to get this point out, is that people generally reflect too late. Because it leads you to this loneliness that you were talking about. There is no specific way that you're going, and there's no set destination to go there. And once people realize that, and once they've been spinning the wheels a little bit, then they decide to reflect on where they are, and then they panic out of that.
So yeah, and that it can be kind of disheartening to be at that point where, man, I'm reflecting. It's been 10 years, and now that I'm actually looking back, like I didn't do what I wanted to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but what I've been doing definitely isn't it. It felt good in the moment or whatnot, but now, it's been 10 years. I want to settle down, but nothing I did got me to the point of settling down. Or, man, I really wish I could tour the country, but nothing I did pushed me towards getting out of my local scene. And then you feel like you're behind. It can be, lonely, overwhelming. It can be, kind of like kicking yourself. So the best thing to do is to kind of look ahead, plan these goals so that you can kind of avoid that.
Yeah. And that reflects in your art too, by the way. That has negative connotations there. So that will ultimately affect what your original goal you should have set for was. So it's a negative feedback loop that you generally fall into. Now,
we're not saying that you can't not have a plan. Plenty of artists are, like, their whole thing is, I'm a free spirit, like, especially in folk that I do. Like, I just saw, I mentioned last time, like a couple weeks ago, I saw a guy in a concert at the Trinity House who, I forget his name. I'm so bad with names, but he had been doing it since he was like 16. And he is, to put it in perspective, he's like 70 now.
Okay. Wow.
So he's like a folk singer. He tours, he hitchhikes, all of his stories, whereas him, like, I don't know where I'll end up. I flew to France for a 1-day event and I had no money to get back home afterwards. So I just had to hitchhike a ride with a couple of teenagers who hooked me up for the night, and I didn't know anything they said, but they were like, hey, we know you. So that can be part of your goal. If your goal
can be the journey. Yeah.
If your goal is the journey to be that free spirit and just go follow where the road goes, but you need to know take some time to be like, is that me?
Right.
Will I be happy at the end of the day when that is? Or do I want something different? Do I want something more? Because I guarantee if he had been doing that for 20 years and he realized, this isn't what I wanted. I thought it was, but it's not. Well, there's going to be some regret.
Oh, most definitely.
So, but going from that, like another thing we see that aside from not having a goal, riding the waves, another thing we see because you might not have a goal is that you're not budgeting with a goal in mind. You're not planning for, okay, well, how do I financially achieve these things that I want later in life? We're bringing money into it. We're bringing budgeting into it.
Yeah,
that's what we're doing.
It's the unsexy stuff.
It's the unsexy stuff.
It's important. It's really important. I feel like this one can manifest itself in a lot of different ways. And obviously the money talk goes back to how you were kind of raised. Shout out to the Millionaire Mind.
Read it if you haven't. We're gonna
absolutely, yes.
We're gonna rip off the 6-figure home studio.
We will have a book list.
I want to do it at 50 though instead of 100.
Oh yeah.
I think sooner we can do it, the better.
Definitely.
And it makes me need to read more books. Anyways.
No, totally. Yeah, no, I like I said, I think this can manifest itself in multiple different ways. And that could be through just not knowing how much it might cost you. So you're going to need to do some market research for what this will entail. And you're going to need to start setting aside money for that and investing into yourself. It can manifest itself in ways that is just honestly bred out of just laziness, and maybe laziness is the wrong way to say it. That's a little bit brash, but I would
fear.
say I was going to say fear is definitely the motivator. I would say the negative motivator in this case, I think too, because it can be very intimidating watching those numbers add up, and all of a sudden you're playing with these like kind of like, oh well, this is like 15% of my income, and this is 10%, and now it's like, and then the worst part about it sometimes with that is that you get to see where the money goes, and it's not always very sexy.
Once a week I look at my bank account.
I look at it every day.
You're better at it than I am.
Every day.
I hate it, but I also love it because it makes me make good decisions.
Yeah.
But then also because I do that, I had enough. Like I was in Port Huron over the weekend, and on my way up, I popped a tire. So
oh God!
I had to, and it was on the sides. They couldn't patch it.
Oh,
so I had to get the whole thing replaced. I'm like, well, I'm glad I got $206 in my bank account.
Yep.
And then I got home and there was a letter in the IRS saying, hey, there's some fees. You paid all your taxes, but your CPA did something stupid, so now you have to pay an extra $100. And I'm like, okay, well, here's $300 that I like 2 days ago. I had no intention of spending that, and unless I looked at it and kept track of it.
Talk about
$300 from like nowhere.
Yeah.
In 2 days. Can be crippling.
It can be, depending on how you are budgeting and everything in between. And that's why it's important to have those. Obviously, this would probably manifest itself in an emergency fund of some sort. These were 2 emergencies, I think, that you've had. So I think it would be arguable that you could take it out of your emergency fund for either the business and then for your personal emergency fund. But yeah, man, first of all, I want to say those letters from the IRS, talk about a heart flutter right away. That will ruin your month, your entire month, dude.
Dropped.
Yes. I'm like, the more we don't talk, the happier I am.
I was like, please say I overpaid and you're giving me like $10 back.
I
even if it's like
wish for
$2.
those days. Wish for those days, man. And knock on wood that we won't have to speak to them again for a while. Anyway,
but anyways,
that was a little bit sidetracked.
I bring it up. I bring it up because like part of my goal is to, be a homeowner, be a successful business owner. So I have business banking account, personal banking account, savings account, emergency account. I want to have this much in the bank account, like 6 months of expense before I start, investing in more gear, or in 6 months my personal account before I start investing in the stock market, things like that. So these are all things that I've planned about fiscally, financially, that allowed me to be, I'm not at all the goals yet, but because I started building them, I'm able to pull from them when these emergency things supply. Right. If there is no goal, if there is like, I'm just working from check to check, I'm not trying to set things aside, even if it's simple as like getting an Acorns account, which I personally have, and this is non-sponsored, and say anything about it, but it doesn't change my buying habits. I like them because, I made it like, it rounds up the nearest dollar, puts in the stock market, doesn't change my buying habits. It doesn't pull much from my bank account.
It actually makes your bank account look pretty nice too.
Yeah.
It's very satisfying.
Yeah. And
all round numbers.
Exactly. And it just slowly goes up over the years. I've been doing it for, I'm not going to go in the details of it, but even though I don't care if I do or not, but I'm not going to, because it's not what the episode's about. But anyways, because I know my goal is to be financially supported of myself and have a home and have these things backed up and be successful in this, be successful in that, I was mentally setting things aside for when things like this happen. So it wasn't like, crap, where do I find the money? Well, I'm just gonna ride on my spare tire for the next month until my next paycheck comes in, or until I get my next client where I'm able to buy this tire. And the same thing you really need to be able to do with your music, because I want to have 10,000 listeners at the end of the year on Spotify, 10,000 monthly listeners. Well, that's gonna take advertising. That's gonna take content marketing. You're gonna have to buy Facebook, Instagram, ads, Spotify ads, however you decide to go out about doing it. We'll have an episode about that a little bit later. But you have to know that, okay, well, I have to set aside budget so that I can do that, to get it in front of people. So maybe you get your first royalty check or whatever from Spotify or whatever, and a couple $100, like, man, I could buy this new guitar pedal, or I could buy this new amp or whatever. It's like, no. Does that align with your goal? And maybe it does. Like, I just bought a guitar because it suits part of what I want my studio to stand for. It's a very unique one. It's going to come up in a future episode.
It's really cool.
But it aligns with what I want my studio to stand for. But if it doesn't stand for what you want to stand for, but marketing it does align with your goals, then that's where the money needs to go. And it can be hard. It can be very difficult.
It's really hard. It's really hard. It takes a lot of discipline.
Yeah. But once you know what you want to do, and especially if what your goals are, you go even deeper and find out your core values and see if it aligns with your core values. Episode 2 or 3, I don't know which. Check it out. Then you're even more convicted of like, no, it's simple. I'm just going to set this money aside. I'm not going to buy this guitar because this aligns with what I need to do. So spending money on the right things versus the wrong things, being able to build a budget and plan for that. Otherwise, as I said, you can go broke from things that don't matter.
Absolutely.
And you have to keep working your 9 to 5 to pay these bills.
Yeah. And mind you that these money things, like, you can listen to this episode and go out and change everything if you want, but generally with these money things, it will take time to actually adapt these changes. So, you can listen to this, like I said, go change everything right away, but really just take your time and really understand where your money's going and how you need to spend it before you make anything like that. So I just wanted to touch on that real quick too.
And even if you make changes right away, see, the whole saying is like, you have to have money to make money. Right. It's a very slow process. Kind of like being successful in the music industry. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. It takes time. So it's going to be not easy. It's going to be years before you start seeing some benefits from this. Like there's some things I've invested in, some things I've put aside a good chunk of money in every month. And I'm just now starting to see some results. I'm just starting to be able to get some return on what I've been doing. So, keep all that in mind. This isn't, I'm not a financial advisor or anything.
Yeah, this is not official financial
advisor.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So let's talk about, some other things that we see.
Yeah, I would say the next one is unable to accurately reflect on where you are. So this kind of goes back to what we were talking about, and I want to quote the good old Andy Bernard from The Office. And this is like a very watered down quote because he doesn't say it exactly like this, but you never know when you're in the good old days until you've left them. So every day when I arrive to the studio or when I'm driving to the studio, I reflect on every day. I reflect on where I'm at short term, like how was the session yesterday? Was everyone satisfied with what they have? Things like that. I think like more medium long term, I'm like, well, more medium term where I'm like, okay, what do I have coming up this week? What do I have coming up next week? What can I do better? Blah, blah, blah. Right. Then I think more long term and I'm like, compared to where I was last year, am I at a better spot? And I really do go through this every day. Honestly, I think it's just routine at this point. And honestly, it's really inspired by
it's a good habit.
It is a really good habit.
Atomic Habits.
It is. So I never built it out as an atomic habit, like mindset. It was more of just I'm more inspired by things, I guess, on the way to work. So like podcasts. I was like this morning I listened to the new Avenged Sevenfold album because I used to be a fan back in the day, and that inspired me today. I was like, wow, this is great. And it just makes you think, and it's just like, okay, cool. Like I feel like I'm starting to see this road work itself out even more so now, right? And that's because you and I have both set goals for ourselves, for our studios and whatnot, but you have to be able to reflect accurately on your journey that you come across so far. You can't overinflate it and you can't diminish it. Seriously. I know being humble is awesome, but if you fucking killed it up to this point, you got to be honest with yourself and be like, dude, I have fucking killed it.
It's not bragging if it's true.
Exactly.
That's a big thing. Like it's not, oh, I gotta be humble. Don't say. It's like, no, if it's stuff that you are doing, it's not bragging. Yeah. It's stuff that you are doing. Yep. So if you are going out there, man, I'm touring every day, not every day. Like I'm touring, multiple times a year. I'm gaining fans. The venues are growing. The fan base, the numbers are going up.
Yep.
All these things are growing. Be honest about it. Like,
Yeah.
don't be like, oh no, I'm just a starving artist. Like, no, you are doing good work.
Right.
Let that, understand that, appreciate that. But the vice versa. If you're not doing work and you look back like, man, I'm where I was a year ago.
Yep.
I should be different.
Yeah.
Now, this reminds me of another saying. We tend to overestimate what we can do in a year and underestimate what we can do in 5. So don't be too hard on yourself. Like, man, I'm so close to where I was originally, but maybe financially you're very similar where you were. It took me 3 years of pretty stagnant growth before I, between 2 years ago and then last year, I multiplied my income by 3.5 times.
That's great.
But before that, it was like, maybe $500 more, maybe $100,000 more.
I was very similar.
Yeah.
Very similar.
But if you look back at what you're doing, you can say, okay, well, maybe the big number isn't increasing exactly where I want it to, but am I improving, or am I putting things in place? Do I have more systems? So think about it. Try to be as objective as you can. Now, it's impossible to be completely objective.
Yes.
Give yourself some slack. If it really is like, I've done nothing different. Or don't. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, more so like if you know that, hey, the number hasn't grown, but I know that I'm doing things I'm investing in the things that will improve. Right. You can be like, okay, well, I still need to work harder to get the result, but this is part of that journey.
Yeah.
But if it's, man, I haven't improved financially and I haven't been doing anything that really changes. I've just been, I've been partying with my friends. I've been going to the bar after night, which could be part of what you want to do. If those are bars you want to play, so you want to know the bar member and try to see if you can find out who the venue owner is, or like go to see other bands playing so you can see if you can get on their ticket at the next show, build relationships. That can be part of it.
That can be.
But are you doing that, or are you just drinking with friends?
Right. And be honest with yourself.
Be honest with yourself.
Seriously, be honest with yourself. That's the hardest part about this, dude, is just being straight up with yourself. Have to be sometimes your own self's best friend and then your own self's worst nightmare. Generally, I'm my own worst nightmare most of the time.
That's why I'm here.
Then that's why you're here, because Sean is my best friend.
Yes,
so
Brandon, you are beautiful and you are doing a great job.
He
glows. Watch the video podcast. You will see he is actually radiating light. It's kind of concerned. Right now, I think he might have consumed like some plutonium or something.
Maybe.
But
maybe.
That is
I
not
just had
edible.
Michigan cherry coffee. No.
That is not edible. That is not part of any recipe. Do not need plutonium.
Please don't.
But completely off topic.
But no. But like you were saying though, it's just sometimes you have to be yourself's own worst nightmare. Sometimes you have to be yourself's best friend, and sometimes you have to find a good balance between the two. But you have to really be able to accurately reflect, and that sometimes takes good quantifiables that you can look upon. Sure, you can always look at the dollar amount, but like Sean said, he made a really great point, is that it's not always about the dollar amount, even though that we are very accustomed to thinking that is the case. We always want to improve and grow more, and usually that is within the bank account. But generally, like I think just with general life advice is that is not where your bread is always buttered. You want to be a well-rounded person. You want to be a decent human being, being able to leave this earth eventually, right? And make your imprint upon it. And that doesn't always accurately reflect in the bank account. So do what you need to do according to your goals.
Yeah, money is just an easy way to count because it's literally numbers.
Right.
It's easy to measure numbers because it's presented as numbers. But things like, man, like something I did for the last couple of years, like, well, how many books have I read this year versus the year before? How many clients have I had versus the year before? How many reviews do I have versus the year before? Like, there are things that are unrelated, like maybe harder to measure, that aren't just like, oh yeah, my bank account's bigger or my bank account's smaller, but they still relate to it. Like, I'm running more than I was the year before, going to the gym now. Well, if you have physical goals that align with your physical goals, just make sure you keep up with it. I would say, but also don't be so hard on yourself that if you miss a day, I'm done. Okay, right. I failed. I didn't go to the gym today. I'm done. You can like have some slack. It's if you miss one day or get off the track a little bit, jump on as soon as you can, the next day as possible, or the next minute if possible, because the longer you go without it, the harder it is to get that get going again. Yeah.
I think some of the best quantifiables are actually qualitative, believe it or not. And there's no way to actually quantify a qualitative thing, right? So it's just mainly just based on some objectivity, but a lot of subjectivity as well.
Give me an example. I want to push back on that.
I would say, for an example, is if you're like, let's go back to your example with working out and stuff. So you can actually measure that quantitatively. You can measure, you can weigh yourself, you can do whatever you want. You can measure your times or do whatever. You can measure by weight, like actual weight that you're lifting. Or you can be more qualitative about it, more visual about it, and just say, hey, I'm looking better than I was before, or hey, I'm feeling better than I was before. Sometimes you don't need to have that number attached to growth. Sometimes it's just a gut feeling sometimes. Seriously, like if you think you're crazy for thinking that you're doing better just because your gut is telling you to, generally, I would argue that you are probably doing better in some way. Because first of all, if you're feeling good about yourself, you're not in a scarcity mindset. So that's first of all positive. Yep. But I think just generally, like, I think people are generally honest with themselves most of the time. And that's my only reasoning behind it. I do try to think that way. Like I personally, like myself, being fully honest, like I do need to lose some weight and get into better shape. And I told my doctor, like, I will not look at the scale. I want to do this generally just by how I feel and how I'm looking. That's it. So that was an example. It was a long-winded example.
So for looking, I'll agree. Like it's a very objective thing.
Yeah.
It kind of can tie to the scale depending on what you're trying to do.
It can.
Because like I said, like I'm trying to build muscle.
Measure. Yeah, you can measure it, like all those things. Yeah.
But for if I'm feeling better, that is very hard to measure. Like I just feel better during the day, but still not impossible. If you do things like keep track of how much time I'm spending being productive at work after when I work out versus when days I don't. Because like I know when after I go to the gym, I just have so much more energy throughout the day, and I can quantify that by measuring. Okay, well when I'm at work, how much time am I bullshitting and doing cookie clicker? Yeah, I'm addicted to it. I love it. Like legit. Or how much time am I doing like working on projects, sending emails, doing things like that. The days I work out, I've measured it. I do more of the right thing. The days I go for a walk, when I come back, I have more energy. And then I'm more open, and I can measure kind of some of the conversations I have with clients. Like, you can retroactively, my stutter's coming out. You can retroactively look back and say, okay, on these communication, like I was much nicer on this day than I was that day. So maybe I should do things that make me feel nicer to the people that I want to work with. Yeah. And it's harder to quantify, but I do think you can.
I think I have like a couple examples, just more aligning with like the music side of things is like, let's say you're going out and you're meeting new people or you get new clients or whatever you're doing, and you can measure how many people you've met by the contacts, but like, how do you measure how good your relationship is with them, right? Like there's no number for that. I mean, you can count the texts, sure, but are you going to quantify happy points for like how happy you made somebody, right? Like, so that's like another thing is like, that's very, very, like you have to know where you kind of stand with your gut and like just as an overall person. Another example is I've been doing a ton of editing lately. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to bring up all the old batching ways of doing it and use Beat Detective and Pro Tools and stuff and refamiliarize myself with it. Cause I was going by hand. I was like, I got to do this like fast, and I was like, oh my God, like I'm getting so much better at this. You can quantify that in time. Sure. But I think overall the sound itself too, I was like, this just generally sounds better. And like, how do you quantify sound? It's all subjective, right? So that's my only pushback to that is that there are those small instances that I think we deal with every day that we would probably love to measure, that we just can't,
That's fair. No, I do 100% agree with you. At a certain point, like there are things ways that you can be creative in measuring it, but as a whole, definitely there are certain aspects that are a little tricky too. And for sure, you just have to have faith that what you're doing is the right thing because it gets in your gut, it feels better, definitely. And you subjectively see the results that you enjoy.
Absolutely.
So I guess I think that's a good way to wrap up the whole thought of
the mistakes.
The mistakes, not as a whole, but just particularly being retrospective on what you've done and how to measure what you can, feel with your gut what you can't, but just be aware of what you're doing and how to look back and actually get something from it versus just I did this. But
definitely
the last thing I really want to cover before we move on to how to set your goals is not even if you know what your goals are, if you are a band, if you are a group, and you don't communicate them, the band will fall apart because it's almost guaranteed that somebody will not have all the exact same goals you do. And it's entirely plausible that if your goal is to make a living touring for the rest of your life, the bass player probably might want to start a family.
And it's always the bass player.
It's always bass player because bass players suck. I'm a bass player, but so like, and after 2.5 years of rocking the local scene, touring different states, building a thing, like a fan base followership. Okay, we're gonna do our national tour, first national tour. It's been 3 years in the making. We're ready to go. Bass player's like, I just got married last summer. We're having our first kid. I don't know if I want to go on this tour.
What a buzzkill. I'm sorry.
Yeah, because bass players suck. But so if that's not communicated, that your goal is to have a family, but our goal is to make a living on the road.
Yeah.
Well, eventually you're going to butt heads.
For sure.
And well, crap. Well, the bass player writes all the songs and he handles all the lighting, and that's a huge part of what we do. And if he's not part of it, we have to either buy the stuff off of him and learn how to do it ourselves, or we have to find someone else to do it and got to replace the bass player. And we only have 2 weeks to do it because we're going to start the tour soon. Like it can be so stressful and can end bands and has ended bands and will end bands moving forward. You were telling me that this exact happened. They signed to a record in the 80s.
Yep. He was signed to a record label in the 80s. I believe some subsidiary of Roadrunner Records back in the day, but I'm not too sure about that. But he was signed to this label and they were going to go do this thing. I'm not sure if they were recording or if they were going to go on tour at the time, but everybody had a different goal in mind, and I think it was no, he's the bass player, so he was good to go on that. So shout out to him, man. He was good to go. He was good to go. But
never mind then.
Yeah. It was the opposite of what we were just talking about.
Wow. Okay.
So we just debunked our own example.
A cool bass player.
Damn it. We're so good.
That's so mythical.
But it was I think it was the drummer that was like, well, I want to like stay back with the family. I want to have a family. Exactly what you were talking about. And they ended up just not doing anything with it. It just all fell apart. And that's sometimes just the sad reality of it. And mind you that if you've noticed, if you've been following along with this, is that there are two separate goals here. One's a personal goal and one's a professional goal. And those will come across each other. It's inevitable. Like you have to make sure that your personal and your professional goals align.
Unless you intentionally align them, they will fight.
Yep, because they will clash eventually. They are on a track like a train heading towards each other, head-on collision, until you divert those two or align those two, depending on however you need to do it to make those work. But yeah, so those do muddy the waters for sure.
So yeah, it can be like once. You might know your goals, but make sure you know everybody else's goals too. Yep. And if they don't know their goals, work with them to find out what they are so that you're not blindsided years down the road. Or you don't blindside them years down the road.
Right.
Because maybe...
Two-way street.
Yeah. Because maybe all of their goals are to tour, but yours is like, no, I need to build this so that I can only tour maybe once a year, but still have a family versus all the time. And they're like, no, go. We love being on the road. You don't want to blindside them either. So communicate what the goals are.
And be honest.
Be honest with yourself. Be honest with them. Have that conversation. And unfortunately, like if they don't align and you've got to end it, maybe you got to end it and find somebody else that does align with it. It's better to build with people who align with what you're trying to do than build and have it fall apart. Yeah, just communicate what your goals are. Make sure you're all on the same page. And as you are growing, one more thing to do that we see is kind of the whole idea of, this was going to be really quick, the whole idea of blowing up. My plan is to release this song. It's going to catch the world by storm and it's going to blow up. My plan is to go on The Voice and everyone's going to see me and I'm going to sign a record deal and I'm going to blow up. Well, my plan is to put this cover on YouTube and everyone's going to share it around and I'm going to blow up and I'm going to be the next Justin Bieber. I'm going to be the next Rihanna. I'm going to be discovered.
Bad plan.
Bad plan. Yeah. It's not a plan.
It's not.
It's not how it happens.
It's not. It's just a dream.
It's a dream. Pipe dream. So, and how, even if it's worked for others in the past, that is such a minority. It's such an outlier from the bell curve of people who actually, build and have success. Record labels don't want to invest in people anymore. 98% of people who sign for record labels don't go anywhere. They get dropped. They don't succeed. The labels don't want to do that anymore. So if your goal is to get discovered and they'll find my music, they'll find me and I'll get pushed into stardom. they're not in that market anymore. They want people who already have momentum that they can just put a little more money in, feed the fire, and then ride that up and make their return on their investment from that, which is positives and negatives. But the goal of being discovered, blowing up, this song is it. It's just people are just going to vibe and love it. That's not a goal. That's not a plan. If your goal is just to blow up, well, that's not an achievable goal. Which SMART goals, it's not achievable.
There's no defined end to that.
No defined. And how it works for others is not how it's going to work for you. Don't base all your decisions on what other artists have done in their careers, because you're not them. Your music's not the same. You're not in the same city. You don't have the same voice, the same instrumentation. You're not at the same place at that right time, taking advantage of the same opportunities. You're just not them. You're you. You are creative. Your music is your own. It means something. It speaks to completely different people. It fucking matters.
It does.
But it's not theirs. It's not that same story. Yep. So don't feel like, oh, it took them 3 years to be big. Yep. It's not the same. It may take you 10. It may take you 20. It may take you 6 months. You don't know.
And that's a tough piece of steak to swallow. Seriously. That is really hard. And I see people doing that all the time. It took this person 2 years. Yeah. Cool. Good for them. I'm happy for them. I hope they continue to succeed. But let's focus on how long it's going to take you. Because guess what? Sometimes you can do it less than that, if you really have a solid goal and a solid plan put into place. And
you take the opportunities when they arrive. Like, luck is just opportunity meets preparation.
Yep.
So if you're prepared and you have an eye for it, that's your luck.
And it kind of goes back to what we were saying about kind of investing your time with this goal, so you know where to put your time and where to put your money, so that when that opportunity comes across, you're right place, right time, because you prepped for it.
Yeah, because if your goal is to be discovered, well, go to find your local scene, or like move to Nashville, or move to LA, the places where the music you want to make is big.
Yep.
It's not lucky to blow up in Nashville.
Yep. It's deliberate.
Yeah, that aligns with your goals.
There's a reason why Nashville is what it is.
Yeah. I want to be amazing. I want to be a songwriter. Well, you're not just going to post your songs online and be discovered. No, if that's your goal, you're going to do things to align with it, like move to Nashville, or join songwriting clubs, make connections, join different ways to try to sell your music, put it out there.
Write-arounds and whatever.
Yeah, write-arounds, meet different artists that have got the song. I think you'd be great for it. Try to network that way. And at that point, when you write a song that does get big, that's not luck.
Right.
That's preparation. You're following through with your goal, and you took advantage of the opportunity when it arose. But if you're just waiting on things to happen, that's not it's not a plan.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to end with that, why it's important to have these goals, so you know these steps that you can take to move forward to more quickly, effectively achieve them. And so you can look back and say, yep, I did this, I did that. This is I feel better about this. Once again, going over SMART goals, they're specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. So when you do make your goals, you're going to want to use these SMART goals. Just keep them in mind when writing. Make sure that you are specific. Like, I want to be a songwriter. Great. Well, what does that mean? Well, I want to write songs for some of country's biggest hits, hit artists. That's a big goal. Or I want to write songs for some of pop music's big artists out there. Cool. Well, now that you know specifically where it needs to go, you know, we're kind of like who you need to network with, where you need to move. It's not just like, I'm going to write songs and throw them out there and see what happens. No, now you have more of a specific idea of where you want to go. So all of your goals, keep in mind the SMART goals. And then once you do have them, communicate them with your band or your team, whatever you're trying to do in the music.
Or write them down for yourself.
Yeah, well, first, for sure, write them down for yourself, and then share them to make sure it aligns with everybody else who you have with you. Make sure they're going to support you. They're not going to, even if they don't mean to, they're not going to hold you back. They're taking that journey with you. Like, one of the reasons why Brandon and I were like, we're doing this podcast together was because right off the bat, we're like, yeah, I want to do this. And I'm like, yeah, I want to do that. It's like, yeah, that's my goal with this.
Yep.
To, you know,
that's literally how it happened.
Exactly.
Yep.
And then you were like, want to start a podcast? I'm like, yeah, I'm serious. And you're like, I'm serious too. And that's how it happened, because immediately we were like, yeah, the goals align.
I think we started like 2 weeks after that.
We did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it all started by saying, this is our end goal with it. It aligns. Cool. Immediately, I know we can make this path together and do it and be successful at it, because there's no butting heads.
Exactly.
So that's really what you need to do. Write down these SMART goals. And once you do, you'll feel like you have a path forward. You're making progress toward your career. Now, how do you do this? How do you write SMART goals? Or how do I recommend doing it? Well, my personal path, I know I'm just kind of taking it.
Please. Because
overwhelmingly controlling this final part of it.
Because I have goals in mind, but I don't approach it in this topic because I don't have a set way of doing it, to be honest. So I'm actually learning a lot. So go ahead.
Well, I have a template that I use for writing down my goals, and I will send it to you and also in the show notes. So if you want to download it afterwards and write it out, feel free to download this template. It's meant to be printed and write on my hand because I personally prefer writing by hand, but you can take it, it's just a Google Doc. You can edit it and do it digitally if you want, but I highly recommend printing it, doing it by hand. We just retain information much better when we write it versus when we type it. So the process that I do of defining the SMART goals is in this document I have, I break it down into 6 different categories. There's the 3-month goals, 6 months goals, 1-year goals, 5-year, 10-year, and 26-year goals. So it goes very far out. And what I recommend is starting at the farthest. Go to 26 years first. It can be hard to imagine, where am I going to be in 26 years? Like, where am I going to be when I'm 52 years old? I don't know, but I can, and it's going to change. This is going to always change. So you want to revisit every 3 to 6 months. But think, where am I going to be? Where do I want to be in 26 years? Do I want a house? Do I want a family? Do I want to be on the road? Do I want to, make money all from my music? Do I want to teach other people? Do I want to have whatever you want to do? Put that down. Write that down. If you want to write down your personal goals and your professional goals, so your career goals, and separate them. So you have, these are my personal goals, these are my professional, and then see if they align. If they don't align, think about, okay, well, what needs to change? Do I care more about this personal aspect or this professional aspect? And make sure they align at the 26 years. And then work backwards. Go to 10 years. Okay, well, if I want to be here after 26 years, where do I need to be 10 years from now in order to be on that path there? Well, if I want to have my final house, I want to be buying it 26 years from now, and I want it to be this really nice house that I buy. I want my kids to be going off to college at that point. That's your goal. Well, then you need to, at 10 years, you need to have a certain home where you can raise kids, but also have enough to set aside to put in towards this. A larger house down the line, you need to be able to have a career that supports that. If you want to be home, well, then you need to work your career around being able to spend time at home. Or if you don't want that, if you just want to be on the road and your goal is to tour 24/7, 26 years from now, well, do you have the equipment? Do you have a team that can help support you? Do you have a rotation of artists that can perform with you backlining if someone in your band can't make it, or if you're a solo artist? Do you have connections in the industry that can help give you gigs? Do you have a manager, a publicist, all these things that you need to be able to keep that going 26 years down the line? Work backwards again, 5 years. What do I have to have done 5 years from now in order to hit my 10-year goals? Backwards, what do I have to have done in 1 year in order to hit my 5-year goals? Backwards, what do I have to have done in 6 months in order to hit my year goal? So if my year goal is to have an album that people really appreciate, well, in 6 months from now, you better have them all recorded.
Yeah.
At least recorded, if not in the mixing, mastering stage, so that you have time to promote the album. Ideally. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can have that done. Well, that means, well, crap, I haven't started anything yet. Well, we might have to adjust your goal at that point if you don't have anything started, or you have to really be, okay, it's crunch time. So backwards, 3 months. Well, I need to have everything recorded. I have to have all the musicians signed on board for it. I have to have recording sessions booked. I have to make sure I'm practiced enough. I have to start thinking about where I'm going to market this, what the messaging of the album is, what am I going to release singles? Am I going to do the waterfall method, which is another thing we talk about? Or is this going to be just drop the whole album? What's my plan of attack behind it so that you know how to move forward? And everything goes from one to the next, to the next, to the next. And it builds, it all aligns towards what the final end goal is. And it's a lot easier to work backwards than it is to go forwards. Because if you go forwards, you're going to be so focused on what you need to do now and how that will evolve versus making it evolve where you need to be in the future, and thinking, well, if I'm the person who is doing this 26 years from now, who do I need to be now? What do I need to start now in order to achieve that? So that's how I personally recommend doing that. And then once you do have your goal set, okay, I got my 3 months, my 6 months, and my year, planning out specific details much further than that is very hard to do.
It's very difficult.
But if you do it right, your 3 month, your 6 month, and your year goals will still align and get you towards the down the line, the 5 year, the 10-year goals, because you've worked backwards and you know that they will get you where you need to go. So there's a separate form that I use. It's a technique I learned called rocks and sprints. And it's where you break down a year into quarters, where different chunks of 3 months. And each of those 3 months is broken into 12 weeks. And what the thing is, you take your main goals from your SMART goal sheet, and then you write down, okay, these for the next 3 months, these are my personal ones, these are my professional ones, on this second form. And then you take them and break them up into those 12 weeks. So it makes it more manageable versus like, man, I need to have a whole album written in 3 months. That's insane. Well, maybe not. What if you write one song every week? If you write one song every week, that's a 12-song album.
Yeah.
If you write one song every other week, that's a 6-song EP.
Yep.
If you're just starting off, there's nothing wrong with doing an EP.
No, not at all.
Not at all. And it's a good way to get people interested. And you can see what it's almost better to start with less.
It might actually be better.
Yeah. So that you're not committed to something, and you can get feedback. You can get a faster feedback cycle. I don't know, what is that the correct term?
Yeah. Oh, you're talking about the build, measure, learn loop, something like that. Yeah. So there's this thing called the build, measure, learn loop, which we have mentioned in another episode. Although I did not remember the name at the time. It's from the book The Lean Startup by Eric Ries, possibly. Definitely go check out that book for sure. It's not really applicable to, like, not everything in there is completely applicable, or like it's like really tough to sometimes to justify what something means in terms of what we're doing. But most of the time it is a good guide to go after. But this is called a build, measure, learn loop. It's you build the product or the prototype, you put it out to the audience, and then you get feedback, and then you start over again or just modify what you have. So yep.
The way I learned about it was called just the feedback loop, but it's basically the same thing. You make it, you put it out, you get feedback, and then you revise it.
Yep.
So putting out less music at the start to see what people like, what connects with your audience, what gets the attention of the people who want to listen to your music out there. So anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself.
No, this is great.
If you break it into 3 months, okay, well, I have all my songs written in 3 months. So if you want to do an EP, once every other week. Oh, that's not undoable. Okay, I can write a song a week, and then I can have a couple jam sessions with these musicians that I know the next week, and we can kind of flesh it out, and they can add drums and guitar, and we can build that. And then next week I'll write another song, and they'll come and we'll jam, we'll rehearse the first one, and then we'll work on the second one. And then the next time, the next 6 months, okay, well, at the 6 month part, I have to have them all recorded. Man, I got to book recording sessions. We got to be here for like a whole week and like knock them all out. It's like, well, maybe, or you can just book 2 days at the end of those 12 weeks for the second set, the second quarter, if you want to call it that, the second rock. It's called rocking sprints because like every 3 month quarter is a rock, and then each week is a sprint. Okay. So what you sprint towards that final rock. So maybe towards week 11, you book your recording sessions like 2-3 days, and you spend each week before then. Now you've got all those songs written. You have 2 rehearsals a week with your band, and you just polish, and even you maybe schedule playing out once every other week, so you can get feedback from the crowd. You can reiterate the songs before you go into the studio. Well, now it's a lot more doable because you've practiced for a whole 3 months. Actually, for some songs, even the full 6 months before going into the studio. Now you're polished. You know what you need to do. It's not figuring out in the studio, oh, what if I try this? What if I do that? It's like, no, this does this does that, and you're way more efficient in the studio. Well, now recording an album in 6 months is much more doable.
Absolutely.
And then you can communicate with them. Okay, well, we need to have these 3 songs, get the most feedback when we play them live for a crowd. So these 3 songs are the singles. Communicate with the engineer that, hey, these are our 3 singles. We need one of them done every 2 weeks at the start. So in the third rock, hey, these are our singles. We get them out, and we can promote them for 4 months before we start releasing them, or just have the singles ready and promoting them so that in the fourth quarter, the fourth rock, okay, the first month we release the first month we release the first single. And in order to release it, we have to have this much promotion beforehand. So we have to make these materials on this week, this material on this week. It just breaks it down so it's much easier to be not overwhelmed by how much work it takes. And also you can break down, okay, well, this is the budget. It's going to cost 10 grand to have the whole album recorded, mixed and mastered. Maybe it's 50 grand, depending on where you go. Maybe it's $200. You got a buddy if that's what you want to work with. It really depends on what you want to do. But then you can say, okay, well, this is a band. There's 4 people. It costs 10 grand. I'm just going to do simple math. It's 10 weeks away. So we need to save a grand a week amongst the 4th of us. That means every week, each of us needs to put $250 aside. Much more doable than crap. We're going to record in two weeks in order to hit the deadline. And we got to come up with $10,000 fast.
Yeah.
In fact, the more you can plan in advance, the better, because it's easier to set this money aside. $250 is not chump change.
Right.
How can it be hard to set aside? Even if you've got a group of 4 people, well, maybe you're like, man, I can't quite do that. I can do like 150, but I can't do 250. Well, maybe start looking into how can I crowdfund this? How can I get fans, like build up interest to get fans to donate for it? How do I get, like, maybe you want to try to approach an indie label and see if they can help give you an amount up front to fund it. There's other ways to do it, but you have time to figure this all out now. And it makes it much less scary, more doable to say, okay, I have to save $250 a week versus I need 10 grand.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah. Which one sounds more doable?
Definitely the 250.
Yes, I agree with that 100%.
I mean, it's basically like, oh, I'm going to take another car loan.
Pretty much.
Or something like that.
It's temporary car loan.
Yeah. And you'll get a return on it once the album comes out if you promote it right and do all that.
I guess all car loans are temporary, but I mean in a sense that it's like it'll disappear within a month or so, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And if all your goals are SMART goals, you know what you need to do to measure it. You know what the specific goal is, so how you can get I started backwards. You know the specific things you need to do. You know what is measurable about them, so what steps you need to take to get there step by step. You know it's achievable within that time. So you know what it's jumping ahead, you know it's time bound, like what the deadline is to have it all done. You know what's relevant that aligns with your personal and career goals because you've done all that work. You've gone from 26 years and you've gone backwards. So that's why building it that way just makes it so much easier. It's going to take a couple of hours to sit down and do this.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to take a couple of time. And as I said, it's going to change. Your goals from far out are going to change slightly or maybe drastically. You don't know what life's going to bring. So revisit this every 6 months or whatnot. But every 6 months to a year. That's how I do it. But it makes it so much more achievable, so much less stressful, less panic inducing of I need to do all this now.
Right.
To be like, okay, no, there's a plan. I have these goals, everything I'm doing, and there's faith that everything I'm doing will get me where I need to go. It may sound like, man, I'm posting all these things on social media. No one's following me. My fans aren't engaging as much as they need to because I don't really have any fans to get me where I need to. But I know that this is important to me to have this online presence, to be able to tell my story in this way. And the more I do it, the better I'll get. And the better I get, the more people will want to pay attention to me. And the more people pay attention, the more growth I'll get online, the more merch I'll be able to sell, the more live stream tickets I'll be able to do, the more people will come to my concerts, share my music around, yada, yada. There's faith that, no, this is aligned with the plan. Yeah. I know where this is going to go. Yeah. It's hard now, but I know where it's going to go.
So question for you then, when you're setting these deadlines, what would you consider a hard deadline versus a soft deadline? What would you set those stipulations up to be? Because I can imagine a lot of people going into this and having all soft deadlines, and this will just keep getting pushed back sometimes because procrastination maybe sometimes, or things come up or something's not followed correctly. I'm guilty of it too, so I'm not blaming you guys at all because I'm totally guilty of it too. So when would you say that boundary is put in place versus hard versus soft? So
for me, the difference between a soft boundary and a hard boundary is a soft boundary is one that, before I even dig into that, we make time for what matters to us. So if you go through and they all align with your core values, everything is important to you. This is what you want to be doing. You've taken the time to really figure out what your end goals are and it matters to you, and that's what you want. You're going to make time for it because we make time for the things that matter to us. But to answer this question more specifically, a soft boundary to me personally is usually stuff that just relies on me. And a hard boundary is usually when other people are involved. I don't like being an inconvenience to others. So if I'm okay, my soft boundary is to have a song recorded every other week because I'm the one who's doing it. But a hard boundary is I need to make a song every week so that the next week we can practice it as a band. If your goal is to, if you just want to be the headliner and you have like other people in the background, like, you know, artists support your music, but you're like the headliner and you want to be that singer-songwriter, then you need to have all the songs done. It's all on you. But you don't want to waste other people's time at rehearsal when you don't have a song. So that's more of a hard deadline. Or we need all these songs practiced before we go into the studio because this is going to cost money. This is going to take time. And we booked through the engineer and he took half up front to even book the dates, and we're not getting that money back. So if we're prepared or not, we lost the money. So might as well be prepared and actually get something from it. That's a hard deadline. Things that you know motivate you to take the next step. If you don't have something done by that point, then you can't achieve the next part of it. That's what makes it a hard deadline to me. And you want to structure it so that you have intermittent hard deadlines in between your soft deadlines to motivate you to get the soft ones done so that by the time you have the hard one, you're prepared for it.
That makes a lot of sense.
That's how it works for me. I'm a huge believer of accountability. That's why I've tried podcasting by myself. Those are all soft deadlines.
Yeah.
These are hard deadlines because I don't want to disappoint Brandon.
Likewise to Sean. So seriously.
We're doing this. This is our 6th episode right now. We're going to be doing our 7th one shortly.
Yep.
And most podcasts don't make it past 7 episodes, but because we're doing this together, we're definitely hitting that.
Oh, most definitely.
So that's the difference between a soft deadline and a hard deadline to me. So yeah, that's how I recommend putting together all the goals. And it sounds like a lot, I know, but we've just went over what can happen if you don't do this, if you don't take this much intentional effort into it. And we want you to succeed. This is the recipe that I've come up with towards success in long term, is having these goals and know where you're going to go. And it's more than just kind of having where you want to go. There's a bunch of other things that you get from doing this. So I've been rambling on because this is my process. Once again, the assets are in the show notes. If you want to download them and start putting down your goals, then shoot us an email about what your goals are. Like, let us know what you're doing. I love to hear. Love to hear what your goals are and like what you're planning on doing moving forward. But on top of that, there's other benefits. I'll let kind of Brandon take lead for a little bit because it's just been the Sean show for a bit.
So some of the benefits from today's episode and learning how to plan your goals via the smart way. First of all, you know what to do next. That's a softball one. You'll have a better idea of where to go with your path. Maybe not every step might lead to the next, and you might have some auxiliary steps along the way, but you will generally have a better idea of where to go and you will feel like you are progressing. So that ties into the mindset too. Number 2, you know what matters, so you can say no to certain things. So like, no, you cannot buy that new guitar, Sean, or no, you can.
But it's so pretty. It's copper.
It is really pretty. I can't wait to show it off to everybody. Or no, you cannot go out and party with your friends tomorrow night because you have to go practice with your band. And so those SMART goals will help keep you in line a little bit. These are your commandments, or more or less. These are what to live by. Number 3. You can build a team that also aligns with your goals. So like what Sean was saying with the hard versus soft deadlines, you can better plan around other people's time and set hard deadlines for yourself to make sure you guys are ultimately more efficient along the way and get stuff done. And it also helps you stay motivated because like we were saying, you can measure that progress and kind of reflect and look back and see how far you guys have come together.
It also helps you,
or maybe not how far you come and how you need to go harder at it.
Yeah, how far you need to go. And something I just thought about, it also helps you divide tasks.
Yes.
If you're all aligned with the same goal and you all know what you need to do to get there, it's not all on you anymore. You can say, okay, well, you're good with funds, so you can manage the funds of the bank. I don't have to do that anymore. You're the best at writing lyrics, so you can write most of the lyrics. We'll revise it, but you can take part of the songwriting process. Yep. You're a really good people person, so we want you to talk to the other bands and try to get
and the engineer
on their ticket. Or the engineer, try to get the Benny to like you. I know how to connect with the audience, so I can write down the set order and cast some jokes or transitions in between, or think about unique experiences for the audience. So you can divide tasks and make it even easier. This is why it's harder to be a singer-songwriter in some ways than to have a band. Some ways it's not because there's other people involved. But being able to delegate tasks to people who are invested, and not having to pay a manager to do it, or pay a publicist, or get other people involved, having people who are aligned and dedicated help you split task. So I just that's on our list, but it's
like
popped in my
splitting
head.
tasks like that when you have to hire people and you're going through that and trying to align your goals with your SMART goals, trying to align yourself with your SMART goals is like we were saying before. I want to touch on this one more time because I do think it's that important, is that you get to choose where you put your time and your money. So you're saving your investment, right, for elsewhere. So if you do need to hire a manager at some point, you have that availability because you guys have done it yourself somewhere else, or you picked up the slack somewhere else, or you haven't hired where you need, or somewhere else where you guys can just do it yourself. So there are ways to manipulate this and really make it work for yourselves.
And then you also know when you need to get a manager because, if by year 5, this is our goal. We've been doing it up until now, but having a manager would help. We know, okay, it's time now.
Yep.
It's time to try to get signed. It's time to start putting stuff out there for licensing. You have more of a path of time. I said it was your spot and I keep jumping in.
No, you're fine. No, this is great. This is great.
Do into this.
The last bullet point we have here, and actually it's more redundant from what I've been saying, but with these goals, you can look back on your progress to see how far you've grown as an artist, but also a person, and to actually be able to successfully contribute your art to the world because it deserves to have it.
Mm-hmm. That's a great closer. Your music needs something. The world deserves to have it. Your fans need to hear it. So time to put it in front of them.
Do it.
Well, anyways,
do it in a smart way.
Smart way. Plenty. Anyways, thank you for dining in with us today. That was our recipe for building your goals. If you do something different, let us know. If you enjoyed this episode, give us your feedback. Please follow us on whatever platform you're listening to us on, or subscribe if you're watching the video podcast on YouTube. If you have any feedback for us, our email is in the show notes or in the description of the video. Let us know your thoughts. Let us know what your goals are. If you fill out the document, send it my way. I'd love to see what you have filled out with it. And
we might even be able to make suggestions for you too if you have any questions on that document.
Yeah, if you have any questions on how to fill it out, or you need some help, like hey, is this doable or whatnot, or just anything you have questions on, please reach out, let us know, and give us feedback on the show. Yeah, absolutely. Anyways, as I said before, thanks for dining in with us.
Thank you,
and bon appetit.
Bon appetit.
From our kitchen to yours, have fun cooking.